Chapter 4 Invisible Know-How, Inc. As mentioned earlier, limited liability abstract corporate beings needed no passports to travel altogether invisibly across national borders. Soon after World War II, America's 500 largest corporations became supranational, taking with them out of the United States the invisible legal controls over what had been born as American industry with all its know-how. The know-how had been paid for initially by the U.S. people through their government's wartime or on the brink of wartime's underwriting of the prime technologies as initially developed only for the U.S. Department of Defense or the Manhattan Project or the space program. Developed in wartime at government, we the people's expense, and turned over gratis for operational efficiency in peacetime to privately owned corporations. World War I brought vast munitions buying on credit by the U.S. government, and the figures ran into multi-millions of dollars as private U.S. industrial corporations acquired post-war operational rights to all the wartime government-financed new era technology production machinery. Stockholders prospered. World War II saw the same U.S. government credit employed to produce multi-vaster new technology munitions, with the dollar figures running this time into the multi-billions of dollars. World War III's third of a century of cold warring between the USA and USSR, waged vicariously through many hot war puppeted nations, has seen the annual munitions figures running into the multi-trillions of dollars. The USA 1981 national debt is over $1 trillion, and the U.S. cannot pay even the interest on that debt. We can very properly call World War I the $1 million war, and World War II the $1 billion war, and World War III the $1 trillion war. In the meantime, all the industrial research and development, as well as its products, have become involved with the invisible technologies of atomics, electronics, chemistry, molecular alloying, and information processing. All the research and development of all the products and services that are going to affect all of our forward days are now being conducted in the realm of the electromagnetic spectrum reality, not directly apprehendable by any of the human senses. While the North American situated factories and spectacular city buildings seem to be and are thought of by humans as being American property because they are located on American land, most are no longer USA people-owned. For instance, though thought of as American, a majority of the skyscrapers of Honolulu belong to Japanese bankers. Arabian oil billionaires own many U.S. city skyscrapers. Kuwait owns the large South Carolina coastal island of Kiowa. What was once whirled around high credit for American ingenuity and friendliness is no longer existent. On February 1st, 1982, the United States ambassador to the United Nations stated to the media that all the United Nations now hate the USA. What they hate is Grunch. But Grunch is able to deceive the world into blaming the very innocent people of the United States. All the continental USA's industrial factories and grounds, and 90% of all that can and does produce physical wealth, has already become, or is about to become, the humanly invisible property of inhumanly operative supranational corporations controlled by the invisible human owners of invisible Swiss bank account code numbers. A vast new giant of approximately no-risk capitalism is now astride the world. Earning over $1 trillion a year, this supranational giant's monopoly over know-how, wealth, research and development and production and distributive facilities is worth at least $20 trillion, USA dollars. September 1981. While the giant now owns and controls 4/5 of the planet Earth's open market bankable assets, $1 trillion of those giants' assets are in monetary gold bullion. Astride spherical spaceship Earth, the supranational corporate Grunch of Giants faces a political giant of non-capitalistic forces controlling the lives of 2/3 of humanity. In making these observations in regard to inanimate corporations, we do not infer antisocial attitudes on the part of the corporate officers. A corporation's executives are elected by its board of directors. The directors are elected by the number of shares of stock as voted directly by their holders or as voted by the holders of their shares' proxies. This voting is not on a democratic one stockholder, one vote basis, but on an as many votes as shares owned basis. This being so, the corporation's lawyers have no alternative to reminding any altruistic, socially concerned executives that the corporation is committed by law only to making money for its shareholders, and therefore that any socially concerned altruistic proclivities of any corporate executive must be realized outside the corporation's and at the executive's own expense. In the August 3, 1981 issue of Time appeared the following article. President Reagan appointed William Baxter, a Stanford law professor who firmly believes in the virtues of large-scale enterprises unfettered by excessive government regulation, to be his antitrust chief in the Justice Department. Baxter's boss, Attorney General William French Smith, succinctly stated the new administration's philosophy in an oft-quoted speech before the District of Columbia Bar. Said Smith, "Bigness in business is not necessarily badness. Efficient firms should not be hobbled under the guise of antitrust enforcement." Baxter openly accepts some responsibility for the merger phenomenon, said he last week. "The statements we've made at the Justice Department have allowed people to think about mergers that they really wouldn't have thought about in past administrations. Mobil's bid for Conoco is a case in point. Such a merger between two of the top 10 petroleum companies would never have been seriously considered during Jimmy Carter's term." Baxter insists that his trust busters will not allow any acquisition that significantly reduces competition within the oil industry or any other. He also maintains that a Mobil-Conoco combination would be subjected to tough scrutiny in Washington, and that is one reason why the subsequent alternative deal with which United Non-Oil DuPont and Oil Conoco was countenanced. Baxter should be wary, if only because the American public has long been apprehensive about excessive corporate power. Attorney General Smith admits the strains of populist hostility toward large companies are deeply ingrained in the USA. Government trustbusters have enjoyed broad public support as they attacked both concentration within an industry and combinations between corporate giants in unrelated business. Yet the burgeoning growth of corporate America has outpaced all the antitrust efforts. Since World War II, the portion of U.S. industry controlled by the 200 largest manufacturing firms has risen from 45% to 60%. Socioeconomically, that is, from majority to minority control. The Attorney General chooses his words carefully. What he speaks of as U.S. industry is not the ownership of the corporations conducting the industrial activity. He speaks exclusively of the physical production activity itself taking place under the roofs of factory buildings situated within the geographical borders of the U.S. of North America. The capital title to and productive earnings of these are 60% owned and controlled by the entirely unknown majority owners of the escaped from America's supranational corporations, the Grunch. 1/3 of humanity lives outside the lands controlled by socialism, all unbeknownst to and undetected by the 1/5 of the 1/3 of humanity residents within the USA, gradually cross-breeding worldians. Their 1/3 of a century ago, kudos for realistically articulated, generously to and concern for others, as well as the U.S. people's legal ownership and control of their economic assets, have been altogether exploited, usurped, or stolen from them by the invisibly integrated supranational corporate giants. The Crunch has conducted its ruthlessly selfish activity always in the name of the USA people.